The morning fog hung low over the hills beyond New Seoul Colony. Gia pulled her thin jacket tighter around her small frame as she walked through the tall grass. At 12 years old, she had learned to move quietly, to stay hidden, and most importantly, to survive. 3 years had passed since the refugee transport crash that took her parents. In the chaos of Earth's evacuation, with thousands of humans fleeing to space colonies each day, one small girl had simply fallen through the cracks. The colony officials marked her as dead alongside her parents, and Gia never corrected them. Better to be forgotten than placed in the overcrowded orphan centers where food was scarce and kindness scarcer. She had made a home of sorts in an abandoned storage unit on the edge of the colony. It wasn't much: a sleeping mat, a few containers to catch rainwater, and a small box where she kept her treasures, a photo of her parents, a book of Earth stories, and a small toy dragon her father had given her before they left Earth. Today's goal was simple: find food. Her stomach had been empty since yesterday noon, and the winter season was approaching. She needed to gather extra supplies before the cold made scavenging harder. Gia followed a small stream that led away from the colony, checking the trap she had set the day before. Empty. She sighed and continued walking, eyes scanning the ground for edible plants or forgotten supplies from the terraforming crews. The old terraforming station loomed ahead, its metal walls rusted and panels missing after years of disuse. The colony had moved on to newer technology, leaving this structure to slowly decay. Gia often found useful items here: tools, containers, and sometimes even forgotten food packets. As she approached the station, a sound caught her attention. It wasn't the usual creak of metal or rustle of wind. It was a high-pitched chirping, almost like a bird, but somehow different. Gia froze, listening carefully. The sound came again, weaker this time from beneath a fallen section of wall. Caution told her to walk away. Strange sounds meant unknown dangers, and unknown dangers could kill. But curiosity, the one luxury she still allowed herself, pulled her forward. Gia crept closer to the fallen wall panel. The chirping came again, followed by a soft scratching sound. Slowly she knelt and peered into the dark space beneath. 2 pairs of eyes glowed back at her, not the dull reflection of animal eyes, but a bright inner light that seemed to hold stars within. As her vision adjusted to the darkness, Gia gasped. Dragons. 2 small dragon cubs huddled together in the shadows. Not the mythical beasts from Earth stories, but Draconis stellaris, the intelligent reptilian species that had helped humans escape Earth when the climate collapse reached its peak. These creatures had space travel long before humans and had offered sanctuary when Earth became uninhabitable. Gia had seen adult dragons from a distance, flying high above the colony or meeting with officials. They were massive, elegant creatures with wingspans wider than transport ships, but these were babies no larger than house cats, with scales that shimmered blue like the deepest parts of the ocean her parents once described to her. The cubs chirped again, a sound so sad and weak that Gia felt her heart squeeze. Their scales, which should be bright and glossy, looked dull. Their small bodies trembled. They were starving. Without thinking, Gia reached into her pack and pulled out her only meal for the day: a nutrient bar she had traded 3 small metal parts for, and a handful of dried berries she had collected last week. It was meant to last her until tomorrow, but the sight of the weak cubs pushed all thoughts of self-preservation from her mind. "Hello there," she whispered, keeping her voice soft. "Are you lost?" The cubs pressed closer together, watching her with intelligent eyes. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." Gia broke off a small piece of the nutrient bar and placed it on the ground, then backed away slightly. The cubs didn't move. Gia frowned. She knew dragons were smart as humans, maybe smarter. They wouldn't just eat something offered by a stranger. She needed to show them she meant no harm. She took a bite of the nutrient bar herself, chewed and swallowed. Then she broke off another piece and placed it closer to the cubs. "See? It's safe. You can eat it." One cub, slightly larger than the other, stretched its neck forward, sniffing the food. After a moment's hesitation, it snatched the piece and retreated. The 2 cubs shared the morsel, taking tiny bites. Gia smiled and broke off more pieces, placing them one by one in front of the cubs. They ate each offering, their movements becoming less shaky with each bite. "You must have been here a while," Gia said, not caring that talking to them might seem strange. It had been so long since she'd spoken to anyone. Where are your parents? The smaller cub chirped, a sound that seemed almost like a question. I don't have parents either, Gia told them, breaking the last of her nutrient bar into pieces. They died when our ship crashed. I've been alone since then. The cubs finished the nutrient bar and Gia offered them the dried berries next. As they ate, she noticed details she had missed before. Their wings, still too small for flight, bore markings that looked like star patterns. The larger cub had a small scar across its left front leg. The smaller one had eyes that shifted between blue and purple in the dim light. I should give you names, Gia said, watching them eat the last of her food. Just until your family finds you. The larger cub looked up at her, tilting its head. How about Haru for you? Gia pointed to the larger cub. And Mina for you, she said to the smaller one. The cubs chirped, seeming to approve of their temporary names. As the last berry disappeared, Gia realized the sun was beginning to set. She needed to return to her shelter before dark. I have to go now, she told the cubs, but I'll come back tomorrow. I promise. The cubs watched her with those intelligent eyes, and Gia felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. A connection. These small creatures needed her, and somehow, that made her feel less alone. As she stood to leave, the smaller cub, Mina, made a soft sound and took a hesitant step toward her. It's okay, Gia assured her. I'll be back. She carefully memorized the location, noting the fallen wall panel and the specific pattern of rust on the metal. Then she turned and headed back toward the colony, already planning what she would trade tomorrow to get more food for the cubs. Gia didn't know that dragon cubs never accepted food from strangers. She didn't know that these particular cubs were the offspring of the dragon fleet commander, lost during a training exercise. She didn't know that adult dragons had been searching for them for days, growing increasingly desperate. She only knew they were hungry, and she had food to share. It was that simple. As night fell over New Sol Colony, Gia curled up on her sleeping mat, her own stomach empty, but her heart somehow fuller than it had been in years. For the first time since losing her parents, she had someone to care for. She fell asleep clutching her toy dragon, unaware that her small act of kindness had set in motion events that would change her life forever. The next morning, Gia woke before sunrise. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she ignored it. She had gone hungry many times before. Today she had a purpose beyond her own survival. She gathered her few trading items, a small solar battery she had repaired, 2 metal containers and a length of wire, and headed toward the colony market. The early morning traders would be setting up their stalls, and they were often willing to make better deals before the day's crowds arrived. The market was a maze of makeshift stalls where colonists traded goods. Earth currency had little value here. Useful items were the real money. Gia moved quietly between the stalls, her small size helping her avoid notice. At the third stall, she found what she needed. The trader, an older woman named Duri, specialized in food items. Good morning, little ghost, Duri said, using the nickname she had given Gia. What do you bring today? Gia placed the solar battery on the counter. It works. I fixed it. Duri picked up the battery, examining it with expert eyes. So you did. What do you need? Protein bars. As many as this will buy. Duri raised an eyebrow. Hungry today, are we? Gia said nothing, keeping her face blank. She had learned long ago that sharing information rarely helped her. 3 bars, Duri offered. 5, Gia countered. The battery is fully functional. Duri smiled. 4, and I'll add some dried fruit. Gia nodded. It was a fair trade. She watched as Duri packed the food into a small bag and handed it over. Stay safe, little ghost, Duri said, her eyes softening for a moment. Gia took the bag and slipped away, moving quickly through the waking colony. She needed to reach the cubs before the day grew too hot. The walk to the old terraforming station took nearly an hour. Gia moved carefully, avoiding the main paths where colony security might spot her. When she finally reached the fallen wall panel, she knelt and peered inside. Haru? Mina, are you there? 2 sets of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, followed by excited chirping. The cubs scrambled toward her, moving with more energy than they had shown yesterday. I brought breakfast, Gia said, smiling as she unwrapped a protein bar. This time the cubs didn't hesitate. They knew her now. Haru took pieces directly from her hand, while Mina pressed against Gia's leg as she ate. Their scales looked brighter today, the blue more vibrant. As they ate, Gia studied them more carefully. She noticed how their small wings twitched when they were excited. how their tails curled when they were content. They were beautiful creatures, unlike anything she had seen up close before. "You're looking better today," she told them, breaking open a second protein bar. "I wonder how you got lost." The cubs couldn't answer, of course, but they watched her with such intelligence in their eyes that Gia felt they understood every word. After they finished eating, the cubs didn't retreat back to their hiding place. Instead, they climbed onto Gia's lap, their small claws careful not to scratch her. Mina curled into a ball while Haru explored Gia's pockets, sniffing curiously. "Hey, that's mine," Gia laughed as Haru pulled out her small toy dragon. It was the first time she had laughed in months. Haru chirped, examining the toy with interest before returning it to Gia's hand. The gesture seemed almost polite. Gia spent hours with the cubs that day. She told them stories about Earth, about the oceans and forests her parents had described to her. She told them about the crash that had taken her parents, and how she had learned to survive alone. The cubs listened, their eyes never leaving her face. When the sun began to set, Gia reluctantly prepared to leave. She placed the remaining food where the cubs could reach it. "I'll come back tomorrow," she promised. This time, both cubs followed her to the edge of the fallen wall, watching as she walked away. Gia looked back several times, waving until they were out of sight. For the next 3 days, Gia followed the same routine. She would trade whatever she could find for food, then spend most of the day with Haru and Mina. The cubs grew stronger each day. Their wings began to extend further, and they practiced short gliding jumps when they played. On the 4th day, Gia arrived at the terraforming station with a special treat, a small container of synthetic honey she had traded her last metal container for. She knew dragons had a sweet tooth. She had overheard colony officials discussing it once when preparing for a diplomatic visit. "Haru? Mina? I brought something special today," she called as she approached the fallen wall. No answer came. Gia knelt and looked into the space where the cubs had been hiding. Empty. "Haru? Mina?" she called again, louder this time. She searched around the terraforming station, checking every possible hiding place. The cubs were nowhere to be found. A hollow feeling spread through Gia's chest. She sat down on a broken section of wall, the container of honey still clutched in her hand. Of course the cubs were gone. Everyone left eventually. She had been foolish to get attached. As she sat there, a shadow passed overhead, blocking the sun for a moment. Gia looked up, expecting to see clouds. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. A full-grown dragon hovered above her, its massive wings beating slowly to keep it aloft. Its scales were a deep midnight blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The dragon was easily 4 meters long from nose to tail, with a wingspan twice that length. Gia froze. Adult dragons rarely came this close to the colony borders. They usually kept to their own settlement on the far side of the mountains or met with humans only in official capacities. The dragon descended, landing with surprising grace for such a large creature. Its wings folded against its body as it studied Gia with eyes that glowed like captured stars. "You are the one who saved my children," a voice said inside Gia's mind. Gia nearly fell off the wall in shock. She had heard that dragons could speak directly into human minds, but experiencing it was entirely different from hearing about it. Haru and Mina?" she stammered. The dragon's head tilted slightly. "Those are not their names, but yes, the cubs you sheltered and fed." Gia swallowed hard. "Are they okay?" "They are well, thanks to you." The dragon moved closer, its movements fluid and precise. "I am Tay, second commander of the Stellar Guard." Gia stood on shaky legs, unsure of the proper way to address a dragon commander. "I'm Gia," she said simply. "I know who you are, Gia of Earth," Tay replied. "My cubs have shared their memories with me. They showed me how you gave them your only food when you yourself were hungry." Gia shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. They needed it more than me. Tay's eyes seemed to look through her, into her very thoughts. "My cubs were lost during a training exercise. They would have died without your help." The dragon's head lowered until it was level with Gia's. "Where are your parents, small human?" "Dead," Gia answered. 3 years ago. Transport crash." "And you have been alone since then?" Tay asked, a note of something like anger entering the mental voice. Gia nodded. "You live in that colony?" Tay's head turned toward New Seoul, sort of, on the edge. "In an old storage unit." The dragon was silent for a long moment, its eyes never leaving Gia's face. This is not acceptable, Tay finally said. You who showed such compassion to strangers live alone without protection or care? Gia didn't know how to respond. Her situation had been not acceptable for 3 years, but no one had noticed or cared until now. Return here tomorrow, Tay commanded. There is much to discuss. Before Gia could ask what that meant, the dragon spread its magnificent wings and launched into the sky with powerful strokes. Within moments, Tay was just a dark speck against the clouds, heading toward the mountains. Gia stood there long after the dragon disappeared, the container of honey still in her hand. Her mind raced with questions. What did Tay want to discuss? Was she in trouble for helping the cubs? Would she ever see Haru and Mina again? As the sun began to set, Gia finally turned and headed back to her shelter. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something dangerous. Hope. Gia barely slept that night. She tossed and turned on her thin sleeping mat, her mind filled with images of Tay's massive wings and glowing eyes. What did the dragon commander want to discuss? Was she in trouble? The colony had strict rules about contact with dragons outside official channels. When morning finally came, Gia packed her few treasures, just in case she couldn't return to her shelter. The photo of her parents went into one pocket. Her toy dragon went into another. She left the book behind. It was too heavy to carry if she needed to run. She didn't bother going to the market today. Her stomach was too tight with nerves to feel hungry, and she had no idea what the day might bring. The walk to the terraforming station seemed both too long and too short. Gia's heart pounded harder with each step. Part of her wanted to turn back, to hide in her shelter and forget about dragons and cubs and mental voices. But a stronger part pushed her forward. She had promised to return, and she kept her promises. As the terraforming station came into view, Gia stopped in her tracks. Her mouth fell open in shock. 7 adult dragons waited in a semicircle near the fallen wall panel. 7 massive, powerful beings with scales of different colors that caught the morning light in ways that made Gia's eyes hurt. She recognized Tay's midnight blue form in the group, but the others were strangers. At the center of the semicircle stood the largest dragon Gia had ever seen. Its scales shifted between deep crimson and gold like a living sunset. On either side of this giant dragon, 2 small forms darted about excitedly, Haru and Mina, looking healthier and more energetic than ever. Gia stood frozen, unsure whether to approach or run. Before she could decide, Mina spotted her. The small dragon let out a happy chirp and bounded toward her, wings half extended in excitement. Haru followed close behind. The cubs circled Gia's legs, chirping and nudging her hands with their heads. Despite her fear, Gia couldn't help smiling. She knelt down to greet them properly. "Hello again," she whispered. "I missed you too." "Approach, Gia of Earth," a deep voice echoed in her mind. It came from the crimson gold dragon at the center of the group. With the cubs still dancing around her feet, Gia walked slowly toward the waiting dragons. Each step felt heavy, as if her body wanted to resist moving closer to such powerful beings. When she stood about 10 meters from the semicircle, she stopped. The cubs settled beside her, one on each side, like small guards. "I am Hoon, fleet commander of the Draconis Stellar Guard," the crimson gold dragon announced. "You have saved my grandchildren when you had nothing to spare for yourself." "Grandchildren?" Gia looked down at the cubs in surprise. She had helped the grandchildren of the Dragon Fleet commander. I just gave them some food," Gia said, her voice small in the open air. "You gave them everything you had," corrected Tay. "You went hungry so they could eat." A dragon with scales the color of polished jade stepped forward. "I am Sue, Council Elder. We have observed your colony since your arrival. We know you are unclaimed and unprotected. This violates our treaty with humanity." Gia shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just careful. I stay out of the way. I manage." "A child should not merely manage," said another dragon, this one with silver-white scales that reminded Gia of moonlight. "I am Jin, Education Overseer. You should be learning, growing, thriving, not fighting for survival alone." The dragons exchanged glances, and Gia felt a strange pressure in the air. She realized they were communicating with each other mentally, a conversation she couldn't hear. After a moment, Commander Hoon spoke again. "We have reached a decision. If you are willing, we offer you protection under Draconis law. You would become a ward of our fleet." Gia blinked in confusion. "What does that mean?" Tay moved closer, lowering his massive head to her level. It means you would never be alone again. You would live with us, learn with us, grow with us. You would be part of our community. You want to adopt me? Gia asked, struggling to understand. Yes, said Jin, the education overseer. Our laws allow for the adoption of any child left without protection, regardless of species. It is rare but not without precedent. But I'm human, Gia pointed out. Sue made a sound that might have been a dragon laugh. And these two are dragons, she said, nodding toward the cubs. Yet you cared for them as if they were your own kind. Species matters less than heart. Gia looked down at the cubs, who were watching her with hopeful eyes. Then she looked at the circle of massive dragons, each one powerful enough to destroy the entire colony if they wished. Yet they were offering her a home. Would I have to leave the colony? She asked. You would live primarily in our settlement, Jin explained. But you would visit human colonies regularly to maintain your connection to your own kind. We would ensure you learned both dragon and human ways. And if I say no? Gia asked, needing to understand all her options. Commander Hoon's eyes narrowed slightly. Then we would ensure the colony authorities properly care for you, as they should have done 3 years ago. We would not leave you alone again regardless of your choice. Gia thought about her life in the colony, the constant hunger, the loneliness, the fear of being discovered and sent to the overcrowded orphan centers. She thought about her tiny shelter that leaked when it rained. She thought about how no human had noticed or cared that she was struggling to survive for 3 long years. Then she looked at the cubs, who had accepted her help without question. She looked at Tay, who had been angry not at her, but at the situation she was in. She looked at these powerful beings who had gathered simply because she had shared her food with 2 hungry babies. I think, she said slowly, I would like to try living with dragons. The cubs chirped happily, jumping up to place their front paws on her legs. The adult dragons seemed to relax, the tension in the air easing. There is much to arrange, said Sue. The colony authorities must be informed. Papers must be filed, but from this moment you are under our protection. Can I ask something? Gia said, suddenly remembering. What are their real names? She pointed to the cubs. Tay made that dragon laugh sound. The one you called Haru is actually named Day, which means greatness in your language. The one you called Mina is named Yuna, which means gentle and kind. Day and Yuna, Gia repeated, looking down at the cubs. Those are beautiful names. They have told us they like the names you gave them as well, Jin said. Perhaps they can keep both as a reminder of how you found each other. Commander Hoon stepped forward, his massive form blocking the sun. Tomorrow we will speak with your colony leaders. Today, would you like to see where you might live? Gia's eyes widened. You mean fly to your settlement? Yes, said Tay. You would ride with me and the cubs would join us. It is not far by air. Gia had never flown before except in the transport ship that had crashed. The thought was both terrifying and exciting. Okay, she said, her voice stronger now. I'd like that. Tay lowered his body to the ground. Climb onto my back just behind my neck. Hold tight to the ridge scales, they will not break. With trembling hands, Gia approached the massive dragon. Tay was easily 20 times her size, his back as high as a small house. The cubs chirped encouragingly, showing her where to place her feet as she climbed. When she was settled between Tay's shoulder blades, the cubs jumped up to join her, nestling on either side. Jay gripped the ridge scales as instructed, her heart racing. Are you ready? Tay asked. Gia took a deep breath and nodded. I'm ready. Tay's powerful wings extended, casting a shadow over the ground. With a mighty push, they were airborne, rising quickly above the terraforming station. The other dragons followed, forming a protective circle around them. As they soared higher, Gia saw the colony spread out below her, looking small and fragile from this height. Beyond it lay mountains and forests she had never seen before. For the first time in 3 years, Gia felt something break free inside her chest, a feeling of possibility, a future of hope. She was going to live with dragons. Flying on a dragon's back was nothing like riding in a transport ship. There was no metal between Gia and the sky, no engines roaring in her ears. There was only the wind in her face, the steady beat of Tay's powerful wings, and the incredible view spreading out below her. The cubs, Day and Yuna, nestled against her sides, chirping excitedly as they pointed out landmarks with their small snouts. Though they couldn't speak to her mind like the adult dragons, Gia found she could understand their meaning through their movements and sounds. That is our home. Tay's voice echoed in her mind as they approached a series of mountains. Gia gasped as they flew over the ridge. Nestled in a wide valley was a settlement unlike anything she had seen before. Unlike the boxy, practical buildings of New Sol Colony, the dragon settlement flowed with the natural landscape. Structures were built into cliffsides, around trees, and alongside a sparkling river that cut through the center of the valley. We call it Seom Ui Byol, said Tay. In your language, it means Island of Stars. As they descended, Gia saw dragons of all sizes moving about the settlement. Some flew between buildings while others walked along wide paths. She noticed smaller dragons that appeared to be older children or teenagers, practicing flight maneuvers above an open field. Tay landed on a large platform near the center of the settlement. The other dragons touched down around them, forming a protective circle. Curious dragons began to gather, keeping a respectful distance but watching with obvious interest. Gia slid carefully from Tay's back, the cubs jumping down beside her. She felt small and very human among so many dragons. Come, said Jin, the education overseer. Let us show you where you would live. They led her to a building set into the side of a small hill. The entrance was sized for dragons, but inside Gia found a surprise. One section of the spacious cave-like structure had been modified with human-sized furniture, doorways, and facilities. We have had human visitors before, Jin explained, seeing her surprise. Diplomats, scientists, teachers. This space was designed for them, but it could be yours if you choose to stay with us. Gia walked around the room, touching the bed, softer than anything she'd slept on in years, examining the desk and shelves, peering into the bathroom with its running water, a luxury in the colony, where water was strictly rationed. This would all be for me, she asked, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. Yes, said Jin. And we would add whatever else you need to be comfortable. The cubs had followed her inside and were now playfully rolling on the soft rug in the center of the room. They clearly felt at home here. Would Day and Yuna stay with me? Gia asked. Tay, who had been watching from the doorway, answered. They have their own sleeping area with me, but they could visit you whenever you wish. Dragon cubs are very social. They need interaction with their family group. Family group. The words echoed in Gia's mind. Was that what she would be part of now? I think I would like to stay, she said quietly. But what about the colony? Won't they be angry that you took me? The dragons exchanged those meaningful glances again, communicating silently. That is a matter we must address tomorrow, said Commander Hoon. For tonight, you are our guest. Rest, eat, explore if you wish. Tomorrow we will face the human authorities together. That night Gia ate better than she had in 3 years. The dragons provided human food they kept for visitors, but also offered some of their own delicacies that humans could safely eat. The cubs stayed with her, showing her how to eat certain foods and chirping with laughter when she made faces at the strange tastes. She slept in the soft bed, with the cubs curled at her feet. For the first time since the crash, she felt completely safe. Morning came with golden light streaming through cleverly placed skylights. Gia found clean clothes waiting for her, simple but well-made garments that fit better than the worn colony clothes she had been wearing. After breakfast, Commander Hoon approached her. It is time to speak with your colony leaders. Are you ready? Gia nodded, though her stomach tightened with nerves. Do not fear, Hoon said, sensing her anxiety. You have done nothing wrong. It is they who must answer for their neglect. 20 dragons, including Commander Hoon, Tay, Jin, and Su, formed the delegation that flew toward New Sol Colony. Jo rode with Tay again, the cubs secure in special harnesses beside her. As they approached the colony, she saw people pointing up at them, some running for shelter. The colony's emergency sirens began to wail. A voice over the public announcement system called for calm, stating that this was an unscheduled diplomatic visit, not an attack. The dragons landed in the colony's central plaza, their massive forms taking up most of the available space. Colony security officers formed a perimeter, their faces showing a mixture of fear and awe. Administrator Park, the colony's leader, emerged from the main building, flanked by his staff. His face was pale as he approached the dragons. Fleet Commander Hoon, he said, bowing deeply. This is an unexpected honor. How may New Sol Colony assist the Draconis Stellar Guard? Commander Hoon's mental voice projected not just to Administrator Park, but to all humans within range. "We have discovered a serious violation of our treaty." Administrator Park's face grew even paler. "I assure you, Commander, we have followed all treaty provisions to the letter." "Have you?" Hoon's mental voice was cold. "Article 12 of the Draconis Human Accord states that all children, of any species, must be properly cared for and protected. Yet we found a human child living alone in the wilderness beyond your walls." Murmurs spread through the gathering crowd. Administrator Park looked confused. "There must be some mistake," he said. "All children in New Soul Colony are accounted for and cared for." Tay stepped forward, lowering his body so Gia could slide to the ground. The cub stayed close to her sides. "This is Gia," Tay announced. "She has survived alone for 3 years after her transport crashed. She has lived in an abandoned storage unit, scavenging and trading for food, while your administration failed to notice her existence." Administrator Park stared at Gia in shock. "This is impossible." "Our systems, your systems failed her," interrupted Sue, "as did your people." A woman pushed through the crowd, Dury, the market trader who had sold Gia food. "It's true," she called out. "Many of us traders knew of her. We called her the Little Ghost. She's been trading for food and supplies for years." "Why did none of you report this?" demanded Administrator Park. Dury shrugged. "To whom? The orphan centers are overcrowded and understaffed. We thought she was better off on her own. At least she was free." A colony official hurried forward with a tablet. "Sir, I found her records. Joachim, age 12, from Transport EC-227. She was listed as deceased along with her parents when the transport crashed 3 years ago. Yet she lives," Jin stated flatly. "She survived the crash that killed her parents. She has survived alone while your systems marked her as dead and your people looked the other way." Administrator Park wiped sweat from his forehead. "This is a terrible oversight. We will immediately rectify the situation. We can place her in our care facilities." "That will not be necessary," interrupted Commander Hoon. "Under Article 7 of the Draconis Human Accord, we invoke right of guardianship." The crowd fell silent. Administrator Park looked stunned. "Guardianship?" he repeated. "You wish to take custody of a human child?" "We do not merely wish it," said Sue. "We have already decided. The entire Draconis Stellar Fleet has voted unanimously to adopt Gia as a ward of our people." But she's human," stammered Administrator Park. "And yet she showed more compassion to dragon cubs than your colony showed to her," said Tay. "When she found my children lost and starving, she gave them her only food. She returned day after day to care for them, going hungry herself so they could eat." The cubs chirped in agreement, pressing closer to Gia's legs. "Is this true?" Administrator Park asked Gia directly. Gia nodded. "They were hungry. I had food. It wasn't complicated." A woman in the crowd began to cry. Others looked ashamed. "The dragons have been kinder to me in 1 day than humans have been in 3 years," Gia added, her voice growing stronger. "I want to go with them." Administrator Park looked from Gia to the dragons and back again. "This is unprecedented." "There will be paperwork, procedures, all of which we will complete," said Jin. "But make no mistake, from this moment forward Gia is under our protection. Any harm that comes to her will be considered an act of aggression against the Draconis Stellar Fleet." The threat was clear, though gently delivered. Administrator Park swallowed hard and nodded. "Of course, we will cooperate fully. Perhaps we could arrange visitation rights. Cultural exchange opportunities? Those details can be discussed," agreed Sue. "But first, we require a full investigation into how a child could be abandoned for 3 years without notice or intervention." As the officials began discussing procedures and investigations, Gia stood quietly with the cubs. She looked around at the colony she had hidden in for so long, at the people who had never seen her, never helped her, never cared enough to look for a lost child. Then she looked up at Tay, whose children she had saved, and at the other dragons who had come to claim her as their own. For the first time in her life, Gia knew exactly where she belonged. 3 days passed in a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and preparations. Gia spent most of this time in the dragon settlement, learning about her new home and the beings who would become her family. The cubs, Day and Yuna, rarely left her side, acting as guides and companions. Jin, the education overseer, began teaching Jia about dragon culture and history. Sue helped her understand the treaty between humans and dragons. Tay showed her the settlement, introducing her to other dragons who would be part of her daily life. Tomorrow is the adoption ceremony, Tay told her on the evening of the third day. Are you nervous? They sat on a hillside overlooking the valley, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The cubs were playing nearby, practicing their gliding skills from small rocks. A little, Jia admitted. What if I make a mistake? What if I embarrass everyone? Tay's mental voice was gentle. You cannot make a mistake. The ceremony is not a test. It is a celebration, a way for our people to welcome you officially. Will there be many dragons there? Yes, Tay said. The entire fleet wishes to attend. It is rare for us to adopt a human child. Many are curious about you. Jia's eyes widened. The entire fleet? How many is that? Over 300 dragons will be present, Tay answered. But do not fear. They come in friendship. 300 dragons. The thought made Jia's stomach tighten. She had spent years avoiding attention, hiding in shadows, making herself invisible. Now she would stand before hundreds of massive, powerful beings who would all be watching her. What if they don't like me? She whispered. Tay lowered his head until his eye was level with hers. They already admire you, Jia. You saved 2 cubs when you had nothing to spare. You showed courage and compassion, qualities dragons value above all others. Jia reached out hesitantly and placed her small hand on Tay's scaled snout. The dragon's scales were warm and smooth beneath her fingers. Thank you, she said, for everything. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Jia woke to find a special outfit laid out for her. A robe woven with threads that seemed to capture starlight, shifting colors as she moved. It fit her perfectly, neither too large nor too small. It is a gift from our artisans, Jin explained as she helped Jia dress. The threads are made from a special material that responds to your emotions. See how they brighten when you smile? Jia looked down and saw the threads indeed glowing brighter. It's beautiful, she breathed. As are you, Jin said kindly. Now come. It is time. They walked together to a large open field on the edge of the settlement. Jia gasped when she saw what awaited her. Hundreds of dragons hovered in the air above the field, arranged in perfect circles that expanded outward like ripples in a pond. Their scales, blue, green, red, gold, silver, purple, and colors Jia had no names for, caught the morning light and reflected it back in dazzling patterns. On the ground, a platform had been built. Commander Hoon stood upon it, his crimson gold scales particularly brilliant today. Beside him waited 6 other dragons, the Council of 7, Jia had learned, the highest-ranking dragons in the fleet. A small group of humans stood to one side of the platform, Administrator Park and several other colony officials, looking uncomfortable but impressed. They had been invited as witnesses to the ceremony. Day and Yuna bounded up to Jia, chirping excitedly. They wore special harnesses decorated with symbols Jia now recognized as the markings of Tai's family line. They will walk with you, Jin explained, as the ones who brought you to us. Music began, a strange, beautiful harmony of dragon voices calling from above. The sound resonated in Jia's chest, making her heart beat faster. Walk forward, Jin instructed gently, to the platform. We will all be with you. With the cubs at her sides and Jin behind her, Jia walked across the field toward the platform. Each step felt important, meaningful. She kept her head high, remembering Tay's words. They already admire you. As she reached the platform, the music grew louder. The dragons above began to move, their circles rotating in opposite directions, creating a living kaleidoscope of color against the blue sky. Commander Hoon lowered his massive head in greeting as Jia stepped onto the platform. Welcome, Jia of Earth, his mental voice projected to all present. Today you stand before the Draconis stellar fleet as one who has earned our highest respect. The cubs moved to sit on either side of her, their small wings partially extended in what Jia had learned was a gesture of pride. 1 week ago, Hoon continued, this human child found 2 lost cubs. They were hungry and she fed them. They were alone and she protected them. She gave freely when she had nothing to spare. The assembled dragons rumbled their approval, a sound like distant thunder. In saving these cubs, she showed the true spirit of the accord between our peoples, compassion that transcends species, kindness that asks nothing in return. Sue stepped forward. We have learned that this child has lived alone for 3 years, forgotten by her own kind. This ends today. The dragons above called out in agreement, their voices harmonizing in a sound that made Gia's skin tingle. Gia of Earth, said Hoon, the Draconis Stellar Fleet offers you home, protection, education, and family. We offer you a place among us for as long as you wish it. Do you accept? Gia looked up at the massive dragon, then at the hundreds of others watching from above. She looked at Dee and Yuna, who had brought her here. She looked at Tay, who had first offered her a new life. I accept, she said, her voice clear and strong. With gratitude and joy, Hoon nodded, satisfaction in his glowing eyes. Then approach and receive the mark of the fleet. Gia stepped forward. Hoon lowered his head until his snout nearly touched her forehead. He breathed out gently, and Gia felt a warm sensation on her skin. The mark is invisible to human eyes, Hoon explained. But all dragons will see it and know you are under our protection. It will fade when you reach adulthood and can choose your own path. One by one, each member of the Council of 7 approached and touched their snouts to Gia's shoulders or hands, each contact leaving a warm feeling that slowly faded. These are the marks of our individual houses, Jin explained. Each offers you specific rights and protections within our society. When the 7th dragon had marked her, Hoon spoke again. Now each dragon in the fleet will send you a greeting, a welcome to our community. What happened next was unlike anything Gia had ever experienced. One by one, each dragon in the sky sent a single thought toward her, a greeting, a welcome, a promise of protection. Some sent images, beautiful landscapes, star-filled skies, ancient dragon cities. Others sent feelings, warmth, safety, acceptance. Still others sent simple words, welcome, sister, family. The collective mental connection brought tears to Gia's eyes. For 3 years she had been alone, unseen, forgotten. Now hundreds of beings acknowledged her, saw her, welcomed her. From this day forward, declared Hoon, his mental voice reaching everyone present. You are Gia of the Stellar Guard, daughter of dragons, protected by our wings, guided by our wisdom, beloved by our hearts. The cubs chirped and climbed up to perch on her shoulders as the entire dragon army roared in unison, a sound that shook the very ground and echoed across the valley. Administrator Park, watching from below, leaned toward his assistant. I believe we've just witnessed the beginning of a new chapter in human-Draconis relations. As the ceremony concluded, the dragons in the sky began to descend, landing in concentric circles around the platform. Many approached to get a closer look at their new human ward, their curiosity respectful but evident. Tay made his way through the crowd to Gia's side. How do you feel? He asked. Gia looked around at the hundreds of dragons who had come to witness her adoption, at the cubs perched happily on her shoulders, at the special robe that now glowed brightly with her emotions. I feel like I've come home, she said simply. That evening, as the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Gia stood on the balcony of her new home. Day and Yuna slept nearby, curled together in a basket Tay had prepared for them. Tay joined her, his large form settling comfortably beside her. Tomorrow your education begins in earnest, he said. Jin has many plans for you. Will it be hard? Gia asked. At times, Tay admitted. You have much to learn about our ways, as we have much to learn about yours. But we will face these challenges together. Gia nodded, watching as more stars appeared above. I never thought feeding 2 hungry cubs would change my life so completely. Small acts of kindness often have the greatest impact, Tay said wisely. You saw need and responded with compassion. In doing so, you reminded us of what matters most. A shooting star streaked across the sky. Gia remembered her mother once telling her to make a wish when she saw one. For the first time in years, Gia couldn't think of anything to wish for. Everything she needed was right here. Thank you, she said to Tay, for finding me. No, little one. Tay replied gently. Thank you for finding us. As night fell fully over the valley, Gia looked out at her new home, at the lights of the dragon settlement glowing like earthbound stars, at the silhouettes of dragons flying against the moon. For the first time since losing her parents, she felt completely at peace. She was Gia of the Stellar Guard now, daughter of dragons, and she was exactly where she belonged.